Rachel Dunmore could tell a horse's mood by the sound of its breath before anyone else in the county could see it in the animal's eyes. She was 28, and she had been blind since a fever took her sight when she was 12. Her father, Walter Dunmore, had built a horse ranch out on the open range with his own hands, and when his knees gave out and his hands started shaking too badly to hold a rope, it was Rachel who kept the place running. She knew every stall by the creak of its gait. She knew every horse by the rhythm of its hooves. What she could not do, the town said, was run a ranch alone, and what no man would ever do, they said, was marry a woman who could not see his face across the supper table. She had stopped waiting for that particular kind of miracle a long time ago. She still worked. She trained horses that other men called ruined, gentling them with a patience that had nothing to do with sight and everything to do with listening. And the ranch survived on that reputation even as the whispers around her never stopped. I want to stop here for just a moment. This story has found listeners in Brazil, in Nigeria, in India, in the Philippines, in Mexico, in South Africa, in places I never imagined when this channel started. And if you are one of them, watching tonight, hearing this for the first time, this channel is still young. We are just getting started. If a story like this has ever found a place in your heart, hit subscribe before you go anywhere. It helps more than you know, and it means we get to keep bringing you nights like this one. Now let's get back, because Rachel's quiet life was about to be tested by a man who rode into her yard without knowing a single thing about her, and by a neighbor who had been waiting years for a reason to take her land. The stranger arrived on a gray gelding in the middle of a spring that had been hard on everyone. His name was Cole Ashford, and he had spent the last several years drifting from ranch to ranch, breaking horses for wages, never staying anywhere long enough for anyone to ask why. He had learned the hard way that trusting people cost more than it paid. A partner he had once trusted with half his savings had taken the money and left him with nothing but the horse under him and a name for foolishness that followed him from town to town. He had heard, 2 counties back, that the Dunmore Ranch trained the best cutting horses in the territory, and that the trainer was a woman nobody wanted to hire near. He had ridden in expecting to find someone difficult, someone who scared off customers. Instead, he found Rachel standing in the round pen with a horse that had thrown 3 grown men, her hand flat against its shoulder, murmuring something too quiet for him to hear, and the horse standing still as stone under her palm. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "I didn't say anything." "You didn't have to. Your horse went quiet the second you stopped moving. People do that when they're staring at something they don't understand." Cole dismounted slowly. "I heard you train the horses nobody else can." "I heard you're looking for work," Rachel answered. "Word travels faster than either of us rides." He had come looking for a season of wages. He stayed because the horse he was riding, an animal that had bitten 2 other trainers clean through their gloves, calmed under Rachel's hands within a week, and because he found himself standing at the fence longer than any job required, just to hear how she talked to the horses, low and even, never once raising her voice. This is the 16th story on this channel. If you like stories like this one, subscribe and leave a like to help the channel grow. Leave a comment and tell me what you're doing right now while you listen. I like knowing these stories travel to every corner of the world, into kitchens and cars and quiet evenings I will never see myself. Now let's get back, because the man circling Rachel's land had finally found the excuse he needed. His name was Otis Pruitt, and he owned the largest spread bordering the Dunmore Ranch. He had tried twice before to buy Walter Dunmore out, and twice Walter had refused him, holding on to the land out of stubbornness as much as love. Now Walter's hands shook too badly to sign his own name, and Pruitt saw his opening. In that stretch of the frontier, a woman running a property without a husband or a male relative able to manage it could be challenged in front of the county court through a petition of guardianship, a legal maneuver used more than once by men eager to claim land from widows and unmarried daughters, on the argument that the property was being mismanaged and needed a responsible party appointed over it. Pruitt filed exactly that petition, naming Rachel's blindness as proof of incapacity and naming himself as the nearest able neighbor, willing to take over management of the ranch and its debts. Rachel heard the news from the county clerk's runner, a boy who delivered it plainly because no one had told him to soften it. She stood very still in her kitchen for a long moment. "He wants the water rights," she said finally. "The creek runs through our land before it reaches his. He's wanted that creek since before I lost my sight." Cole was in the doorway. "Can he do that? Take the land because you can't see?" "He can try. The hearing is in 3 weeks. I have to prove to a judge I'm fit to keep what my father built." She turned toward the sound of his voice. "You don't have to stay for this. It isn't your fight." "I didn't ask whether it was my fight," Cole said. "I asked when the hearing was." Something in his voice made her go quiet. She had spent 16 years listening to people's tone shift when they looked at her, hearing pity dressed up as concern, hearing doubt dressed up as kindness. She listened for it now and did not find it. "You don't need to see to run this ranch," Cole said. "I've watched you do it for a month. I need you to understand that before we figure out how to prove it to a judge who's never spent a day here." "Most people need me to see," Rachel said quietly. "That's usually where the conversation ends." "I don't need her to see," Cole said, and it took Rachel a second to realize he wasn't talking to her anymore. He was answering a question the whole county had already asked out loud more than once. The question of what kind of man would ever want a blind rancher's wife. "I need her to stay." Rachel did not answer that. She turned back toward the barn instead, because there were horses to feed and a hearing to prepare for, and because some things needed more than one conversation before she would let herself believe them. One evening, before the work of the hearing swallowed every waking hour, Cole found Rachel sitting on the porch steps with a bridle across her lap, running her fingers along a worn strap she was mending by feel. "You never asked why I stopped trusting partners," he said. "I figured you'd tell me when it mattered," Rachel answered. "Or not at all, and either way, it wasn't my business to pry." He sat down beside her anyway. "I had a partner once, 2 towns east of here. We broke horses together for almost 3 years, split everything even. I trusted him with the money we saved between jobs because counting coin in front of strangers never sat right with me. One morning, I woke up and he was gone, and so was every dollar we'd put aside. Took me a long while to stop expecting the same thing from anyone who got close. And now? Now I've spent a month watching a woman run a ranch better than most men I've worked for, and doing it without a single dollar of anyone's trust but her own. Makes a man reconsider what he thought he'd learned." He paused. "I'm not going anywhere, Rachel. Not before the hearing, and not after it, whatever the judge decides." She didn't answer right away. She had heard men make promises before, usually the kind that dissolved the moment things got difficult, and she had trained herself long ago not to lean on words until they'd been tested by time. But she set the bridle down, and for once, she let the silence between them sit easy instead of guarded. "Ask me again after the hearing," she said. "Words are cheap before trouble comes. I'll believe you after." The 3 weeks that followed were the hardest work Rachel had done since her father's hands first began to fail. Pruitt's petition rested on the claim that the ranch had fallen behind on repairs, that fences were down, that debts were going unpaid, and that no blind woman could keep a working ranch solvent without a man managing it for her. Cole rode the fence line every day, mapping every break and mending what could be mended before the hearing, while Rachel went through the ranch's ledgers by memory, and by the touch of raised pencil marks her father had once taught her to make for exactly this purpose, so she would always know her own numbers even after her sight was gone. She also did the one thing Pruitt had not counted on. She sent word to every rancher in the county who had ever bought a horse from her, every man who had watched her gentle an animal no one else could touch, and asked them to come to the hearing and say, under oath, what they had seen with their own eyes. The morning of the hearing, the small courthouse filled with more ranchers than the county judge had likely ever seen in one room for a guardianship petition. Pruitt stood first, laying out his case with practiced confidence, speaking of debts that Rachel's ledgers, read aloud by the clerk, proved had all been paid on time. He spoke of neglected fences that 6 different neighbors then stood up, one after another, to say they had ridden that fence line themselves that very week and found it in better repair than their own. Then Rachel stood. She did not raise her voice, and she did not plead. "I have run this ranch since my father's hands stopped being able to hold a rope," she said. "I have trained more than 40 horses that other trainers turned away as ruined. I know every fence post on this land by the feel of the wood under my palm, and every horse in that barn by the sound of its breath. Mr. Pruitt does not want a guardian appointed because he believes I cannot manage this land. He wants my creek, and he has wanted it since before I lost my sight, and everyone in this room who has ever done business with either of us already knows it." One by one, the ranchers spoke. An older man named Ezra Coates testified that he'd bought 3 cutting horses from Rachel in the last 2 years, each one trained better than any he'd gotten from trainers with 2 good eyes, and that he'd trust her word on a horse's temperament over his own judgment. A younger rancher named Silas Thorne described the afternoon Rachel had gentled a stallion that had put his own hired man in a sling, working the animal calm in under an hour, using nothing but her voice and her hands. Even the county's feed merchant stood to say her accounts had never once come up short in the 8 years he'd kept her ledger on file. Pruitt tried, toward the end, to press the point that a woman managing a working ranch without a husband was itself a risk to the property's future, regardless of the current state of the fences. The judge cut him off before he finished the sentence, noting dryly that half the widows in the county manage their land alone without a petition filed against them, and asking whether Mr. Pruitt's concern extended to any of them or only to the one whose creek bordered his own. The judge, a practical man more interested in solvency than sentiment, looked over the ledgers, listened to 6 ranchers testify to the state of the fences and the quality of the horses, and dismissed the petition before noon. Pruitt left the courthouse without a word to anyone, and within a year he had sold his own struggling spread and moved on to try his luck in another county. Rachel walked out of the courthouse with Cole beside her, not touching her arm, never touching her arm unless she reached for him first, because he had learned in that first month exactly what she needed and what she never would. "You could have told the judge I help with the fences," Cole said. "I didn't need to," Rachel answered. "The fences spoke for themselves. That's usually how it works if people bother to listen." He laughed, low and real, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Cole Ashford did not feel like a man waiting for the next place to leave. "You told me to ask you again after the hearing," he said. "I remember. So I'm asking. Whatever comes next, whatever this ranch needs, whatever fool tries to take it from you again, I'm not riding out. Not this season, not the next, not ever." Rachel turned toward him, the sound of his voice steadier than she'd ever heard it. "Then, I believe you," she said. "Trouble came, and you stayed. That's the only proof I ever needed." They married that autumn in a small ceremony at the ranch, with the ranchers who had spoken for her in court standing as witnesses. Cole never once described Rachel's blindness as something he had learned to see past. He simply never treated it as something that needed seeing past in the first place, and in time, neither did anyone else in the county. Years later, the Dunmore Ranch, now known simply as the Ashford Place, bred some of the finest cutting horses in the territory, sought after by buyers from towns Rachel had never visited and never needed to. On quiet evenings, she would still stand at the fence of the round pen, her hand resting on the worn top rail, listening to the horses settle for the night. And Cole would come stand beside her without a word, because some conversations, the ones that mattered most, had never needed to be spoken aloud at all. People still tell the story around that county of the blind rancher's daughter who kept her father's land against a man who thought her sight was the only thing standing between him and what he wanted. They tell it a little differently depending on who's talking, but they all end it the same way, with the fence still standing and the water still running through Dunmore land, exactly where it always belonged. I think about Rachel sometimes, and about how many of us go through life believing that the thing we lack is the thing that defines what we're capable of building. She never saw her ranch with her eyes, not once in all the years she ran it, and it never once stopped being entirely hers. If there's someone in your life who's counted you out for what you can't do, instead of what you've already proven you can, I hope tonight's story finds you the way it found her, with someone standing quietly beside you who never needed convincing at all. Until the next story finds you, take care of yourselves out there.